My family skipped my graduation. But when my $2.8 million penthouse made headlines in the real estate news, Dad texted, "Family dinner at 7 p.m. Important discussion." I showed up with The text came through at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. No greeting, no warmth, just those 11 words from a man who hadn't bothered to acknowledge my existence in 4 years. My father, Richard Caldwell, had always been efficient with his communication when it suited him. This message carried the same authoritative tone he'd used throughout my childhood, the one that expected immediate compliance without question. I stared at my phone screen while sitting in my corner office on the 42nd floor of the Whitmore building, watching the downtown skyline glitter in the afternoon sun. My assistant had just brought in the latest issue of Metropolitan Real Estate Quarterly, and there it was on page 17, a full spread about my penthouse acquisition in the historic Ashford Tower. The article detailed every architectural feature, the panoramic city views, the original crown molding I'd restored, and yes, that $2.8 million price tag that seemed to have traveled faster than wildfire through certain social circles. The timing of Dad's text wasn't coincidental. Nothing Richard Caldwell did was ever coincidental. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my older brother, Tyler. "Mom wants you there. Please come." At least he'd added the courtesy of a please, which was more than our father had managed. Tyler had always been the mediator, the peacekeeper who tried to smooth over the jagged edges of our fractured family dynamics. But even his diplomatic efforts couldn't erase what they'd done. 4 years ago, I'd walked across that stage at Stanford alone. Well, not entirely alone. My best friend Hannah had been there, screaming my name loud enough to compensate for the empty seats where my family should have been. My roommate's parents had taken photos, hugged me, told me how proud they should be of their own daughter for having such an accomplished friend. Strangers had shown me more love that day than my own blood. The excuse had been Tyler's engagement party. Somehow, the celebration of him proposing to his girlfriend of 8 months had trumped my graduation from one of the most prestigious universities in the country. My architecture degree, the scholarship I'd earned, the 4 years of sleepless nights and relentless dedication, none of it had mattered enough for them to choose me. Just this once. "It's not that we don't care about your achievement," my mother, Patricia, had said over the phone the week before graduation. Her voice had carried that practiced smoothness she used when delivering unpleasant news. "Tyler's engagement is a family milestone. Everyone will be there. Surely you understand how important this is." I'd understood perfectly. My accomplishments would always take second place to Tyler's moments. His college graduation had been attended by not just our immediate family but cousins, aunts, uncles, even family friends I hadn't seen in years. They'd rented out a private room at an expensive restaurant afterward. There had been speeches and toasts and a video montage that had made everyone cry. For my high school graduation, they'd shown up but left immediately after the ceremony for some business dinner Dad couldn't reschedule. No celebration, no special meal, just a card with a check and congratulations scribbled in my mother's neat handwriting. The pattern had been clear my entire life, but graduation day had crystallized something inside me. Standing in that sea of celebrating families, watching parents embrace their children with genuine pride and joy, I'd made myself a promise. I would build something so extraordinary that my accomplishments couldn't be ignored or diminished. And I would do it entirely without them. Those first 2 years after graduation had been brutal. I'd taken a position at Chen & Associates, a mid-size architectural firm where I'd worked 100-hour weeks. I'd lived in a studio apartment with a view of a brick wall, eaten ramen more nights than I could count, and poured every ounce of energy into my designs. My vision for sustainable luxury housing had caught the attention of Marcus Friedman, a developer who'd taken a chance on my unconventional ideas. The Riverside project had been my breakthrough. 12 townhomes that blended historical preservation with cutting-edge green technology, each one selling for well above market value before construction had even finished. Marcus had introduced me to his network, and suddenly I was the architect everyone wanted. More projects followed, each one building on the last, my reputation growing in professional circles that my family didn't travel in. I kept my success quiet on social media. No posts about major contracts or awards ceremonies. My Instagram remained private, showing only carefully curated images that revealed nothing about my professional life. When distant relatives asked what I was doing, I gave vague answers about working in design. Let them assume I was decorating living rooms or choosing paint colors. The money had accumulated faster than I'd anticipated. Smart investments, careful saving, and an almost obsessive focus on work had paid off in ways I'd barely let myself imagine during those ramen dinner days. When the penthouse in Ashford Tower came on the market, I'd known immediately it was meant to be mine. The building itself was a masterpiece of 1920s architecture, and the top-floor unit had been neglected for decades. I'd seen past the water damage and outdated fixtures to the soaring ceilings and original details that made it irreplaceable. The auction had been intense. 3 other buyers wanted the property, including a developer who planned to gut it completely and turn it into a sterile modern showpiece. I'd sat in that conference room with my realtor, Jennifer, watching the bids climb higher and higher. My heart had pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. This wasn't just about owning property. This was about claiming something beautiful that others had overlooked, seeing potential where others saw problems. Maybe there was some metaphor in that about my own life. When my final bid was accepted, Jennifer had hugged me right there in front of everyone. She'd worked with me for months, understood what this purchase meant beyond the financial investment. The seller, an elderly woman named Dorothy whose family had owned the penthouse since the 1950s, had attended the auction personally. After the winning bid was announced, she'd asked to meet me privately. We'd moved to a quiet corner of the auction house, this woman in her 80s with hands gnarled by arthritis, and she told me about raising her children in that space, about the dinner parties and the Christmas mornings and the quiet evenings reading by the windows. Her husband had proposed to her on the balcony. Her daughter had taken her first steps in the living room. "I'm glad it's going to someone who sees what it is," Dorothy had said, pressing a small envelope into my hands. Inside was a black and white photograph of the penthouse from 1952, pristine and elegant, exactly as it had been designed. "This is what it looked like when we first moved in. Maybe it can help you bring it back." That photograph had guided every decision I'd made during renovation. I'd hired craftsmen who specialized in historical restoration, tracking down original tile patterns and matching wood stains to samples I'd carefully preserved. The kitchen had been a particular challenge, needing to be completely modernized for functionality while maintaining the aesthetic integrity of the space. I'd spent 3 weeks just finding the right cabinet hardware, sourcing vintage pieces that matched the era. My contractor, James, had thought I was insane. "Scarlett, you're spending more time on these details than some people spend planning their weddings," he'd said while I agonized over the difference between 2 nearly identical shades of subway tile. "This matters," I'd replied simply. Because it did. Every choice, every detail, every element was a testament to the idea that you could honor what came before while creating something new. That respect for history and innovation could coexist. That nothing had to be sacrificed for progress. 6 months of renovation had transformed it into something that made even seasoned real estate agents gasp when they walked through the door. I'd restored every historical element while incorporating modern sustainability features invisible to the eye. The result was a home that honored the past while embracing the future, exactly the philosophy that had made my professional work so sought after. The week I'd finally moved in, I'd invited Hannah over for the grand reveal. She'd walked through every room twice, touching the restored crown molding, admiring the way afternoon light streamed through the original leaded glass windows I'd painstakingly repaired instead of replaced. "This is incredible," she breathed, standing in what would become my favorite spot by the windows. "Scarlett, this isn't just a home. This is art." We'd ordered takeout that night and eaten it sitting on the floor of my empty living room, our voices echoing in the space, talking about how far we'd both come since college. Hannah had built her own success in marketing, climbing the corporate ladder through the same determination and late nights I'd poured into my architecture career. Neither of us had taken the easy path, and neither of us had relied on family connections to get where we were. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if they'd shown up?" Hannah had asked suddenly. "To graduation, I mean. Would you have pushed yourself this hard if you hadn't felt like you had something to prove?" The question had caught me off guard. I'd thought about it before, late at night when I couldn't sleep, but never articulated it out loud. Maybe not, I'd admitted. Maybe I would have been content with good enough instead of pushing for exceptional. Maybe I would have played it safe. "Their loss became your gain," Hannah had said, raising her wine glass. "Here's to families who underestimate us and the empires we build out of spite." We clinked our glasses together, laughing, but there'd been truth in her toast. Spite was a powerful motivator, even if I preferred to think of it as determined independence. The article in Metropolitan Real Estate Quarterly had been unexpected. A journalist had somehow gotten wind of the sale and the transformation, and she'd been persistent about featuring it. I'd initially declined, but she'd worn me down with enthusiasm about how my work represented a new wave of architectural thinking. The piece had run with my name, my age, and enough details about my design philosophy to make it clear this wasn't inherited wealth or family money. This was earned. Apparently, someone from Dad's country club had seen it. Or maybe one of Mom's garden club friends. However the information had traveled, it had clearly made an impact strong enough to warrant this sudden dinner invitation. I looked at the text again, then at Tyler's follow-up message. My first instinct was to ignore both, to let them sit unanswered the way they'd left me sitting alone in that graduation audience. But curiosity won out. 4 years of silence, and now this. I wanted to see what could possibly be important enough to bridge that gap. Also, I'd be lying if I said part of me didn't want them to see exactly who I'd become without their support or approval. "Tell Dad I'll be there," I texted Tyler back. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," he responded within seconds. Then, after a pause, another message appeared. "It's good that you're coming." "Really?" The Caldwell family home sat in Willow Ridge, an old money suburb where the houses hid behind gates and manicured hedges. I'd grown up in that 5-bedroom colonial, playing in the backyard with Tyler, attending the right schools, taking piano lessons I'd hated. Everything had looked perfect from the outside. Most things in Willow Ridge did. I pulled up to the circular driveway at 6:58 p.m., deliberately arriving just before 7. My car, a sleek hybrid that cost more than my first year's salary, looked out of place next to Dad's traditional luxury sedan and Tyler's conservative SUV. I'd bought it because it was the highest-rated electric vehicle for city driving, but I wouldn't pretend I didn't appreciate the statement it made. The front door opened before I could knock. Mom stood there in a cream-colored sweater set, pearls at her throat, her blonde hair styled in the same neat bob she'd worn for 20 years. Her smile was welcoming but didn't quite reach her eyes. "Scarlett, darling, you look wonderful." She moved in for an air kiss near my cheek. Come in. Everyone's in the dining room." Everyone turned out to be Dad, Tyler, and Tyler's wife Bethany. The dining room table was set with Mom's good china, the pattern I remembered from every holiday and special occasion. A rose sat in the center, surrounded by all the traditional sides Mom always made. It could have been any family dinner from my childhood, except for the 4 years of absence hanging in the air like smoke. "Scarlett." Dad stood, extending his hand across the table as if we were business associates. He was 62 now, his dark hair fully silver, his posture still military straight from his years in the service before building his financial consulting firm. "Glad you could make it." I shook his hand, matching his firm grip. "Your text seemed urgent." "Let's eat first," Mom interjected smoothly, already moving toward the kitchen. "Everything's ready." "Scarlett, you still love roast, don't you?" I did, actually, though I was surprised she remembered. We took our seats, Tyler catching my eye with a look I couldn't quite decipher. Bethany smiled warmly, and I felt a pang of guilt. She'd reached out several times over the years with texts and invitations to coffee. I'd kept my responses polite but distant, not wanting to build a relationship that would require me to engage with the family I deliberately stepped away from. The meal began with the usual small talk. Dad asked Tyler about some client at his insurance firm. Mom discussed her garden club's upcoming charity auction. Bethany mentioned a trip they were planning to the Cape. I ate my roast and vegetables, offering minimal responses when addressed directly, waiting for the real reason I'd been summoned. Dessert was apple pie, another family staple. Mom served it with vanilla ice cream, and finally, as we were finishing, Dad cleared his throat in that particular way that meant he was about to say something he considered important. "I'm sure you're wondering why I asked you here tonight." The thought had crossed my mind. I set down my fork, meeting his gaze directly. He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, a rare expression on Richard Caldwell's usually composed face. "I saw the article about your purchase. Very impressive property." "Thank you. I wasn't aware you'd done so well for yourself." "Architecture, is it?" "Sustainable luxury design," I corrected. "Residential and commercial projects." I've been fortunate to work with some excellent developers. Mom leaned forward, her interest clearly piqued. Darling, that's wonderful. Why didn't you tell us? We had no idea you were so successful. The question was so absurd I almost laughed. You never asked. In 4 years, neither of you has called to check in, ask about my work, or show any interest in my life whatsoever. An uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Tyler looked down at his pie. Bethany suddenly found her water glass fascinating. Dad recovered first. We've been meaning to reach out. Life gets busy, you know how it is. But family is family, and I think enough time has passed that we should put this misunderstanding behind us. Misunderstanding? I repeated the word slowly, tasting its inadequacy. Is that what we're calling it? You were upset about the graduation situation, Mom said gently. We understood that, truly. But Tyler's engagement was important too. We thought you'd understand that sometimes we have to make difficult choices. You did make a choice, I agreed. You chose Tyler? Just like you always have. But let's not pretend this is about one graduation. This is about a pattern that's existed my entire life. That's not fair, Tyler spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. Mom and Dad love both of us equally. Do they? I turned to him, this brother I'd once looked up to, who'd gotten every advantage without even realizing it was happening. Tell me, Tyler, when you graduated from Princeton, how many people came? And when I graduated from Stanford, where was our family? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Here's what I think is really happening, I continued, looking back at my parents. You saw that article and realized I've made something of myself without your help or approval. Maybe you're worried about what people at the country club are saying. Maybe you're concerned about how it looks that your daughter bought $1 million property and you didn't even know about her career. Or maybe, and I think this is it, you've realized I might actually be someone worth knowing now that I have money and status you can brag about. Scarlett, that's unfair, Mom protested, her carefully maintained composure cracking slightly. We're your parents. We've always wanted the best for you. You wanted me to fit into the life you planned. The problem is, you never actually paid attention to what I wanted or needed. You never saw me, not really. Dad's jaw tightened, a sign I remembered from childhood that his patience was wearing thin. I think you're being overdramatic. We're a family, and families support each other. I didn't ask you here to rehash old grievances. I asked you here because Tyler and Bethany are expanding their business, and they could use some help. There it was. The real reason for this dinner, served alongside the apple pie. Dad's been helping us plan, Tyler explained, looking slightly embarrassed. We're opening a second insurance office, and we need to secure some additional financing. The banks are being difficult about the loan terms. Dad mentioned that you might be able to help, given your obvious financial success. I sat back in my chair, a laugh building in my chest that I barely managed to suppress. You want money? Not a gift, Dad clarified quickly. An investment. This would be a legitimate business opportunity. The insurance industry is solid, and Tyler's been building an excellent client base. With the right capital, the second location could be very profitable. How much? Tyler named a figure that was substantial but not impossible. I could write that check without significantly impacting my finances. But that wasn't the point. Let me see if I understand correctly, I said slowly. You haven't spoken to me in 4 years. You missed my graduation, never asked about my work, showed no interest in my life. Now you found out I have money, and suddenly I'm worth inviting to dinner so you can ask me to invest in Tyler's business expansion? It's not like that, Tyler started, but I held up a hand. Did any of you even read the article? It wasn't just about the penthouse. There were 3 paragraphs about my design philosophy, my commitment to sustainable architecture, the projects I've completed. Did you feel proud? Did you think about calling to congratulate me? Or did you just see dollar signs and opportunity? Mom's eyes glistened with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or performed. You're our daughter. Of course we're proud of you. We just didn't know how to bridge the gap after so much time passed. Maybe we handled the graduation situation poorly, but we're trying now. You're trying now because you want something from me. I stood up, placing my napkin on the table. Here's the thing about being ignored and underestimated your whole life. It teaches you to value yourself, to know your worth without needing external validation. I built my career without your support. I bought my home with money I earned through my own work. And I did it all while you couldn't be bothered to send a text or make a phone call. Scarlett, please sit down, Dad said, his tone taking on an edge. Let's discuss this rationally. I am being rational. Rational would be me saying no to this investment and leaving. But I'm going to do something different. I pulled out my phone, opening my banking app. Tyler, what's the business account number? He looked confused, glancing between me and Dad. Why? Just give it to me. He rattled off the numbers, and I entered them into my phone, hitting several buttons before holding up the screen. There. I just transferred the full amount you need. The table erupted. Tyler's mouth fell open. Bethany gasped. Mom put her hand to her chest. Dad's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Before any of you say anything, I continued, let me be clear about the terms. This is not an investment. It's a gift. I don't want equity in your business, Tyler. I don't want to be paid back. I don't want anything from any of you. I don't understand, Tyler managed. I'm giving you this money because despite everything, you're my brother, and I do hope your business succeeds. But more importantly, I'm giving it to you so that I never have to wonder what if. I never have to question whether I was petty or small or let hurt feelings prevent me from helping family. I looked at each of them in turn. But I want you all to understand something. This doesn't fix what's broken between us. This doesn't erase 4 years of silence or a lifetime of being second place. I grabbed my purse from the back of my chair. The money comes with one condition. I don't want to be contacted unless you're genuinely interested in me as a person, not as a source of financial support or social status. No calls about investments. No texts when you need something. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be real, and it has to start with an actual apology and acknowledgement of how you've treated me. Scarlett, wait, Mom stood up, reaching toward me. Don't leave like this. Let's talk about this properly. We just did. I showed up for this dinner because you asked. I even brought something with me. I smiled without humor. I brought the success you never thought I'd achieve. I brought proof that I didn't need you. And I brought generosity you don't deserve, because I'm choosing to be a better person than my hurt wants me to be. Dad's face had turned red. You think you can buy your way out of family obligations? Family isn't about money, Scarlett. You're absolutely right, Dad. Family isn't about money. It's about showing up. It's about being there for the moments that matter. It's about love and support and actually caring about each other's lives. I headed toward the door. That's a lesson I learned from Hannah and her family, who celebrated my graduation like it was their own achievement. They taught me what family can be when it's based on genuine care instead of obligation and hierarchy. Tyler followed me into the hallway. Scarlett, I'm sorry. I should have said that years ago. I should have realized what my engagement party would mean to you. I was selfish and thoughtless, and I've regretted it ever since. His apology caught me off guard. Among my family members, Tyler had always been the one I felt closest to, even if that closeness had its limits. Thank you for saying that, I replied quietly. It does mean something. I tried to call you a few times after graduation. You never answered. I know. I saw your calls. I wasn't ready. I met his eyes. Maybe someday I will be. But that day isn't today, and it won't be tomorrow either. I need time, Tyler. Real time. Not just a few months but years, maybe, to process everything and figure out if there's a relationship here worth salvaging. I understand. And for what it's worth, I read the whole article. Your penthouse sounds incredible. The way they described your design philosophy, about honoring history while embracing the future? That's really beautiful. Those words affected me more than I expected. Thank you. Can I ask you something? Why did you really give me the money? I considered the question carefully. Because I'm not them. Because breaking cycles starts with choosing to be different, even when it's hard. And because maybe part of me hopes that someday we can be real siblings instead of just people who happen to share DNA and a complicated childhood. He nodded slowly. I'd like that too. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. I left the Caldwell house and drove back to my penthouse, the city lights blurring slightly through unexpected tears. The whole evening had been exhausting and cathartic in equal measure. I'd gone there expecting to feel triumphant about showing them my success, about proving I didn't need them. Instead, I felt hollow and sad and strangely free all at once. My phone started ringing before I'd even made it back downtown. Mom called 3 times. Dad texted twice, his messages alternating between anger and awkward attempts at reconciliation. I silenced both of them and focused on the road. Hannah called as I was pulling into my building's underground garage. I answered on the car's speakers. "So?" she asked without preamble. "How did it go?" I gave Tyler the money he needed and told my entire family exactly what I think of them. "Oh my God. Details. Now." I gave her the full story as I rode the elevator to my floor, as I unlocked my door and stepped into the home I'd created for myself. Hannah listened without interrupting, letting me process out loud. "Are you okay?" she asked when I'd finished. "Honestly? I don't know yet. Ask me in a few days." I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, the view that had made me fall in love with this place. "Did I do the right thing?" "I think you did exactly what you needed to do. You set boundaries. You were honest. And you proved to yourself that you're capable of generosity even when people don't deserve it. That's pretty powerful, Scar. Or maybe I just wasted a lot of money to make a point. That money isn't wasted if it bought you peace of mind and closure. Besides, you've got plenty more where that came from, future architectural legend." I laughed despite myself. "You're supposed to be objective and tell me when I'm being dramatic." "I am being objective. You're absolutely being dramatic, but you've earned the right to be. Your family ignored you for years, then came crawling back when they wanted something. You had every right to tell them off. The fact that you also helped Tyler? That's just you being a good person, even when it would be easier not to be." We talked for another hour about everything and nothing, the way we had since freshman year of college when we'd been randomly assigned as roommates. Hannah had been there for every major moment of my adult life. She'd celebrated my successes, held me through my failures, and never once made me feel like I was too much or not enough. After we hung up, I stood at those windows for a long time, watching the city pulse with life below. My phone continued to buzz with messages I didn't read. Eventually, I turned it off completely and poured myself a glass of wine, settling into the reading nook I designed specifically for quiet evenings like this. The article from Metropolitan Real Estate Quarterly sat on the coffee table where I'd left it that morning. I picked it up and read it again, really read it this time instead of just skimming for my name. The journalist had captured something essential about my work, about the philosophy that drove every design decision I made. She'd understood what I was trying to achieve in ways my family never had. 3 weeks passed before Tyler reached out again. His text was simple: "Business is doing well. Thank you again for believing in me. No pressure, but Bethany and I are having people over for dinner next month. You'd be welcome if you want to come. No parents invited." I didn't respond immediately. The invitation sat in my messages for days while I debated what I wanted. Finally, I replied, "Maybe. Let me think about it." He sent back a thumbs up, and that was it. No pressure, no guilt trip, just an open door I could walk through if and when I was ready. Mom's messages came less frequently as weeks turned into months. She'd gone from daily calls to weekly texts to eventually just occasional updates about family news. Dad stopped contacting me altogether after I didn't respond to his 3rd message. I think his pride couldn't handle the rejection, which was fine by me. My career continued to flourish. More projects, bigger budgets, features in national architecture magazines. I hired an assistant and a junior architect, started planning for my own firm. The success I'd built kept growing, and now I could enjoy it without that nagging need for parental approval I'd carried for so long. Hannah suggested therapy, and I found a counselor who specialized in family dynamics. Dr. Winters helped me understand that my feelings were valid, that I didn't owe forgiveness just because they were family, and that taking care of myself wasn't selfish. Those sessions became a space where I could work through the complicated layers of hurt and anger and hope that came with estrangement. 8 months after that dinner, I accepted Tyler's invitation. It was smaller than I'd expected, just him and Bethany and 2 other couples they were friends with. We talked about his business, my latest project, Bethany's work at the nonprofit she'd joined. Nobody mentioned our parents. Nobody asked why I'd been absent from family events. It was just dinner with my brother and his wife, normal and comfortable in a way family interactions had never been before. As I drove home that night, I realized something had shifted. The anger that had burned so hot for so long had cooled into something more manageable. I wasn't ready to reconcile with my parents. Maybe I never would be. But I could have a relationship with Tyler that existed separately from that conflict, that honored the good parts of our connection without forcing me to accept the dysfunction. My phone rang the next morning. Mom's name appeared on the screen. For the first time in months, I answered. "Hello, Mom." "Scarlett." Her voice sounded uncertain, tentative in a way I'd never heard from Patricia Caldwell. "Tyler mentioned you came to dinner last night. I'm glad you two are talking again. We're taking it slowly, but yes." A pause stretched between us, filled with all the things we hadn't said to each other. Finally, she spoke again. "I owe you an apology. A real one, not the dismissive explanations I gave you at that dinner. Your father and I failed you, repeatedly, and for that I'm truly sorry." I sat down on my couch, genuinely shocked. "What brought this on?" "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About the patterns, about choosing Tyler, about not seeing you. I talked to my therapist about it." She laughed shakily. "Yes, I'm seeing a therapist now. She's helped me understand some difficult truths about how I parent and the damage I've caused. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or maybe ever. But I wanted you to know that I hear you, and I'm sorry." We talked for an hour. Not about money or obligations or whose fault anything was. She asked about my work, really asked, and listened to my answers. She told me about the charity auction and her garden without making it sound like a performance. It wasn't perfect. Years of hurt couldn't be erased by one conversation. But it was genuine in a way our relationship had never been before. "I'd like to see your penthouse sometime," she said before we hung up. "Not to evaluate it or judge it, but because you created it and I want to understand what's important to you." "Maybe," I replied. "Let's see how things go." "That's fair. Thank you for answering my call, Scarlett. That means more than you know." My father never apologized. As months stretched into a year, he remained the same distant figure he'd always been, just now without the pretense of parental involvement. I made peace with that too. Some people can't change, and expecting them to only leads to more disappointment. Tyler's business thrived. He paid me back the money I'd given him, insisting despite my protests. "You said it was a gift, and I'm grateful," he told me. "But this matters to me. Let me do this." I donated it to a scholarship fund for architecture students from low-income backgrounds. 2 years after that fateful dinner, Hannah got married, and I designed and gifted her and her husband their dream home as a wedding present. Mom came to the wedding as my plus one. We were building something new, cautiously, a relationship based on who we were now rather than who we'd been forced to be in the past. My penthouse appreciation in value as the neighborhood continued to develop. I got offers regularly from buyers who'd heard about the property. I turned them all down. The space wasn't just an investment or a status symbol. It was proof of what I'd accomplished on my own terms, a physical manifestation of the life I'd built without waiting for permission or approval. Standing at those windows on quiet evenings, looking out at the city lights, I sometimes thought about that graduation day 4 years ago. The hurt was still there, but it had transformed into something else. Fuel. Motivation. A reminder that I was capable of more than anyone had believed, including sometimes myself. My family's absence had taught me to value the people who showed up. Their neglect had pushed me to build something extraordinary. Their rejection had freed me from the exhausting work of trying to earn love that should have been given freely. I'd shown up to that dinner with success they couldn't ignore, money they wanted to access, and a life they'd played no part in creating. But what I'd really brought was the most valuable thing I'd learned in those 4 years of silence. I didn't need them to see my worth for it to be real. I'd always been enough, exactly as I was. It had just taken losing them to finally believe it. The text from Dad still sat in my phone, preserved like an artifact. Family dinner at 7 p.m. Important discussion. No apology, no warmth, just expectation and entitlement. It represented everything our relationship had been built on and everything I'd walked away from. I never deleted it. Sometimes you need to remember where you've been to appreciate how far you've traveled. And I'd traveled so far, built so much, become someone I was genuinely proud to be. Not despite my family's absence, but perhaps because of it. They'd given me the gift of their indifference, and I'd transformed it into independence, strength, and a life entirely my own. That was the real payback. Not revenge, not proving them wrong, but becoming someone who didn't need their validation to know I'd succeeded. In the end, the best response to being underestimated is simply to flourish, spectacularly and undeniably, in the space their doubt creates. And that's exactly what I did.